Victoria Justice and Ariana Grande. Two names that only belong in the same sentence if you're talking about the television show Victorious on Nickelodeon, because their careers before and after look absolutely nothing alike. But at that moment, they were co-stars. Now, to be real, you could call them co-stars, but that's not exactly accurate, even when we talk about Victorious. Because look at the name of the show. It was a Dan Schneider program, which already, has a whole bunch of controversy around it. And it was built around Victoria Justice. Again, it's baked into the name. The entire show was designed to make her the star. And Cat Valentine was a character that only existed for comedic relief. But it was played by Ariana Grande. And apparently, her version of that character was more than enough to steal the scene almost every time she was out there. So the real question is why? Because we are now living in a world where Ariana Grande has 7 platinum albums, over 300 million followers on Instagram alone. I mean, she's just finished starring on Wicked, and then the sequel to Wicked. She is a big deal, and I'm not saying that Victoria Justice isn't, but yeah, it ain't the same, because most of her fame is directly connected to starring on Victorious in the first place. Even a quick online search will tell you that a large percentage of her fame is connected to the nostalgia that comes from that one show. So I decided it's time that we actually break it down. Go all in. Because these two names, Nickelodeon had a plan. And Victoria Justice was the plan. She was plan A, plan B, and plan C. And clearly, they accidentally made a pop star out of the wrong woman. And the way they did it, the way it actually played out, is a whole lot deeper than anybody ever cares to acknowledge. But before I go any further, I will fill you in on both of their careers before they got on the show. Then we're going to spend some time talking about what actually happened on that show. Because in the case of Ariana Grande, at least more than Victoria Justice, you kind of know what happened after it. I don't even really got to say that much. But, of course, I'll say some of the quiet parts out loud. Both women are almost exactly the same age and born in 1993. But in the case of Victoria Justice, she does have a legitimate acting catalog before she got on Victorious. If you're just talking about roles where she was a guest star, or actually showed up in some prominent form. She had a guest role on Gilmore Girls, guest starred on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which I personally remember, for the record. And then you had a TV show called Everwood, where she had a guest role as well. Now, when it comes to movies and other things, she actually was in a film with the boys from The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Dylan and Cole Sprouse as well. So, that movie didn't do all that well, but I did dig it up and see it actually pretty recently. But she is really most well known because of what she did on Zoe 101. She was essentially a replacement actress for, Kristen Herrera when she left the show after season 1. And she stayed on it from season 2 all the way on down. And Zoe 101 basically peaked in season 2 and season 3 when Victoria Justice was a main part of the cast. I mean, of course, she did some other stuff, like some commercials here and there. But when it comes to music, she really didn't do anything legitimate outside of, Nickelodeon contract work. And Victorious is a show that was built around her ability to sing and act, and for that matter, dance. Again, not my words. That's what's on record from Dan Schneider, which, again, a lot of controversy, but this is what happened. So, when you look over at Ariana Grande, prior to when we see her on Victorious, there is almost nothing to find in her acting career. Again, just putting it out there. Apparently, she was a voice actor on The Winx Club. Other than that, live action, barely seen. I think there was one role where they technically say she was on camera. And then she was also acting specifically in theater, Broadway and, again, live plays. That's where she was known. And she really stood out for her singing, which makes a whole lot of sense in hindsight. But for the acting community, in television or in movies, Ariana Grande was basically a nobody, as far as we can tell. And then she shows up on Victorious playing Cat Valentine. So, now that we've established what brought them there, and that at that moment, it made a whole lot of sense to make Victoria Justice the star. What happened? But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. I'm Ezra2K. If you really want to know the hidden messages behind nostalgic TV, then you are in the right place. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section, because I try to read them all. The show was about Tori Vega and her experience at a Hollywood Arts Academy. That means she is not just the protagonist, She is the star. You can't miss that part if you actually watch the show. But then you gotta break down her character, because her character as the star was really, for the most part, a straight shooter. She's adapting to the world around her as everything's kind of going crazy. I mean, she's confident. She's, I guess socially adaptable. I mean, that's the language that you could use. I mean, you could call her friendly even, but she's determined. She's hardworking, generally responsible, and you could even call her level-headed. That is Tori Vega, and she is in the center. Yes, she can sing, she can dance, Hollywood arts, all of that, but let's be real. The comedy ain't gonna come from her. But Cat Valentine, played by Ariana Grande, only existed for that one purpose. Because her character is remembered for being mostly, ditzy, dim-witted, absent-minded, say whichever way you want. And she didn't always start off quite like that. I mean, at first it was more just like heightened emotion and just kind of like being over the top. But that immediately or pretty quickly in the show's run became her more or less being looked at like an idiot. Almost like, she wasn't operating on the same wavelength as like a teenager. Like her brain capacity was almost more of a child, like maybe 6, 7 years old. But she was sweet and she was bubbly and extremely emotional, even if her enthusiasm was incredibly childlike. And in the words of Tron over on his YouTube channel, it's almost like she didn't really know how the world works. Like, she's living in her own world that definitely doesn't match with the way things actually function. Again, all went to scenes play this out. But all of that is a whole lot more entertaining and does bring comedy. But that's not 100% of why Cat Valentine is remembered. Now it's the part where I have to be 100% honest with you. Because I am a Christian man, I am married and have children, so I don't know how to look at any of this without considering it from that framework. Because there's one question about Cat Valentine in, the media space that basically everybody has landed on an agreement about. It's not disputed anymore, at least about how they created that character. And the question is whether or not Cat Valentine was a sexualized character. Now, when I say that, the question is really not much of a question. Everybody knows the answer. Again, if you actually paid attention or if you're really breaking it down, she was. So why did that happen? And more importantly, what did it do for Ariana Grande moving forward? Because Tori Vega wasn't that character. I'm not saying that you couldn't poke fun or, look at a scene here and there. I mean, Nickelodeon is still making a show aimed towards children above all else. And Victorious was big, specifically in a preteen demographic more than like teenagers. But Cat Valentine had a whole bunch of scenes where they transitioned her character, who was at one point innocent and childlike and in many ways continued to be that, but also slid towards, being portrayed in ways that, hit very differently after everything we know about Nickelodeon and the Dan Schneider era. Especially when you go back to them. You'll see it in the clothes that they had her wear. You'll also see it in the innuendo that they work into the writing. And you'll even see it with, some of the themes and the undertones that, if you're an adult, it all makes sense to you. Maybe if you're a kid, it kind of might fly a little bit over your head. But notice I said a little bit. And sometimes she says things that definitely hit differently if you're considering the innuendo behind it. I mean, of course, there are other things that, like actions she may take that, they're made to be innocent, but also suggestive, which, again, that's more of a Dan Schneider thing, which, there's no need to, go on that. There's a whole bunch of channels that discuss, that component when it comes to Nickelodeon shows. And what matters most about all of this, whether it's the camera angles or however else they portray the character, she is supposed to be a minor while they're filming this. That's one piece. And she's playing a minor as the character. And lastly, there's the obvious issue of having someone who is portrayed as childlike, but also being represented with these types of images. But hey, it is what it is. I'm not here to bash that part. What I'm here to point out is that Tori Vega and Cat Valentine are very different characters, one of which is a star and one of which is not. But one stole the show, a show that was not about her at all. And because of that, it launched an entirely new career. Allow me to explain. Because Nickelodeon figured out that Cat Valentine was a big deal. It's the reason why they launched Sam and Cat, because you took Jeanette McCurdy, who played, Sam from iCarly, threw it together with Cat Valentine, both of which were popular, characters, even though the show wasn't technically about them, like it's even baked into the title. And they, the show only ran for a year. But while that was happening, a whole bunch else was. Because although I'm here talking about Ariana Grande for a while, this is also about Victoria Justice. Because when Victorious ends, the show basically ends its run in 2013. She goes on to a future acting career, and she did some singing. I mean, if you're not counting stuff that was baked into her Nickelodeon career, She tried to have a solo career, I think, with under Columbia Records. That didn't last hardly, long at all. She never put out a studio album even. And she acted in a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, some of which I remember. Just going off head. I know she was in, Fun Size, which was still a Nickelodeon movie, so I'm not even sure we want to count that because that's while Victorious was running. But if you fast forward, she ends up on, I think 2015, she was on some type of MTV show where she was the lead, but it didn't really work out. Then, later on, she's doing rom-coms. I think I saw something called Perfect Pairing that she was in. So, it was on Netflix, and she did some other film on Netflix that was kind of noticed. She got a guest spot as an adult. And this is more recently when they did a reboot to the TV show Suits, but that only lasted one season, and that guest spot was reoccurring for like maybe 3-4 episodes. I watched the show. She was on it. Like, that happened. But above all else, she's been creating content and more or less been famous for being Victoria Justice. And don't get me wrong, she's famous. She has 24 million followers on Instagram. But then you look at Ariana Grande, who has over 300 million. Because while she's on Victorious, her fandom is exploding. More or less. And the moment the show is over, like right around the same time, even before she gets on Sam and Cat, she drops a studio album. The studio album she was filming while she was on Victorious. And when it comes out, it goes platinum. And now she's like, 7 platinum albums in. It doesn't even matter anything else she did in her career because she goes from essentially a no name in the grand scheme of television and movies or anything like that. And yeah, she was on Broadway and people knew she could sing in that community, but that's not the same thing as being a pop star. And she is about as big as it gets now. Like, her debut album hit #1. That's what she did. Victoria Justice, on the other hand, when she tried to sing, like in her career, she did have some songs she released, but nothing was, Billboard charting or anything like that. And like I said, she didn't even do an album. At this point, when you think Ariana Grande, and now we see, her going into Wicked and, the sequel that, is just dropping now, November 2025, like, this is as big as it gets. Ariana Grande, you could forget that she was even on Nickelodeon. She almost doesn't resemble the same person between what you see now and what you might have seen back then. And everybody knows the come up is real. But the only way I can think of it is Ariana Grande basically became the female version of Drake. Because Nickelodeon did bring, or Nickelodeon/Teen Nick, like under Paramount's heading, Degrassi was the show that Drake was on, where he wasn't the main character. It was an ensemble cast, to be real. But, whether it's, the character he played, Jimmy or Wheelchair Jimmy, however you want to say it, that catapults him onto, kind of showcasing in that platform that he could rap, and then dropping mixtapes and so on, and then becoming the most streamed artist, essentially, of this generation. Depending on, who you ask and what numbers you focus on, that is Drake. And then Ariana Grande did this exact same thing. She was on Nickelodeon, acting on their platform, on an ensemble cast, but this time they had a very clear lead and it wasn't her. And then catapults that on to, a whole bunch of success. When I consider some of the details about what her run on Victorious actually was and everything that happened after, you do realize that I think the character that she played and the way that she was asked to play it, and for that matter, actually went out to do so. And this is nothing against her. It's just the way things fell. She captivated the audience for a very specific reason. And I do believe that going into the mainstream, specifically as a pop star, with those images in the background, that did inform, or for that matter, kind of expedite, her success. Because when you kind of put that sauce on it, of some kind of like priming people to see her in a very desirable way, for lack of a better term, if you catch my drift, and then add to that, like, the foundation of all those Nickelodeon fans or all those young fans who are, more or less going to consume just because, like, they see a familiar face that's been presented and, exposed to them over and over and over again. Again, same thing that happened with Drake. You add those two things together, because Drake didn't have that second part. He wasn't, overly, when he was on TV. But this is different. Everything takes off from that moment. And now you have it. The difference between Victoria Justice and Ariana Grande. Because up until they get to Victorious, there's really no reason at all for Ariana Grande to take off. Certainly not at the level that she did. And the only thing that really happened was her time on Victorious, where she wasn't the main character. She was there for comedic relief and continued to steal the scene every time she was there. And in the case of Nickelodeon, they had set in their minds that they wanted to create a pop star. So they went out to do it, and they basically accomplished it. But when they did, we need to be aware that they accidentally made a pop star out of the wrong woman. If you actually made it all the way to the end of this video, I do have to admit that thank you doesn't do it justice anymore, because you are a real one. And if you want more from me beyond this, just realize there ain't no shame in my game. This is a new channel, so it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.